John Wayne walked off the set. He said one sentence to the director. And that scene was never filmed again. The reason stayed private for 40 years. It was August 1976. Monument Valley, Utah. The red dust hung in the air like it always did, catching the late afternoon light and turning everything the color of old photographs. A Western film set stretched across the desert floor. Wooden storefronts, hitching posts, the kind of frontier town John Wayne had walked through 100 times before in 100 different movies. But this time was different. The crew was ready. Cameras positioned. Lights checked. The director, a young man named Michael Garrett who'd grown up watching Wayne's films and couldn't believe he was now directing the legend himself, stood behind the monitor with his assistant director beside him. "Positions, everyone," Michael called out. "Let's get this before we lose the light." John Wayne stood at his mark. 69 years old. Thinner than he'd been in his prime, the cancer he'd beaten once already having taken its toll. But he still stood like John Wayne, that particular way of holding himself that had defined American masculinity for 4 decades. He was wearing his costume, worn leather vest, faded shirt, that iconic silhouette. His hat was in his hand. The scene was simple. A confrontation. Wayne's character, an aging sheriff, was supposed to face down a younger man who'd wronged him years before. There would be words. Tension. The kind of scene Wayne had done countless times. The script called for him to grab the younger actor by the collar, pull him close, deliver a line about honor and consequences. "Action," Michael called. Wayne stepped forward. The younger actor, a newcomer, eager, nervous about working with a legend, was ready for his cue. Wayne stopped. He looked at the young actor's face. Then at his hands. Then at the script page taped to the side of the camera for quick reference. He stood there for maybe 5 seconds. To the crew, it felt like 5 minutes. Then John Wayne shook his head once. Slowly. Definitively. He turned and walked toward the director. Wayne didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. Michael stood up from his chair behind the monitor, concern flashing across his face. "Duke? Everything okay? We can reset if you need a minute." Wayne reached the director. He still held his hat in his hand, pressed against his chest the way a man holds his hat at a funeral. "I'm not doing this scene," Wayne said. His voice was quiet. Not angry. Not apologetic. Just final. Michael blinked. "I'm sorry? This scene? I won't do it." The assistant director stepped forward. "Mr. Wayne, is there something wrong with the blocking? We can adjust." "It's not the blocking. The dialogue? We can rewrite." "It's not the dialogue." Michael looked at his script, confused. "Duke, I don't understand. This is a crucial scene. Your character needs this moment too." "Find another way." Wayne interrupted gently. "I trust you. You're a good director. But I will not film this particular scene. Not this one." The crew had gone silent. 40 people, camera operators, grips, sound technicians, makeup artists, the young actor still standing at his mark, all watching this exchange with growing bewilderment. Michael tried one more time. "Can you tell me why? Maybe if I understand." Wayne looked at him for a long moment. Those famous eyes, the ones that had stared down outlaws and Indians and Japanese soldiers and every kind of screen villain imaginable, now held something different. Something private. Something that hurt. "No," Wayne said quietly. "I can't tell you why. And I'm asking you not to press me on it. Just trust me that I have a reason. A good one. And it's personal." He put his hat back on his head. "I'll be in my trailer. Come get me when you've figured out how to shoot around it." Then he walked away. Boots kicking up little clouds of red dust. The entire crew watching in stunned silence. To understand what happened next, you need to understand what happened in 1944. John Wayne, born Marion Morrison, was 37 years old when World War II was raging at its peak. He was already a major movie star. Already the face of American heroism on screen. Already the man who played soldiers and warriors and patriots. But he had never actually served. There were reasons. He was 34 when Pearl Harbor happened, older than most recruits. He had 4 children. He had a defense-essential job making morale films. Republic Pictures had convinced the draft board he was more valuable making war movies than fighting in the actual war. All legitimate reasons. All true. And none of them ever felt like enough to Wayne. While other actors, Jimmy Stewart, Clark Gable, Henry Fonda, enlisted and saw combat, John Wayne stayed in Hollywood. He visited troops. He sold war bonds. He made patriotic films. And every single day, he carried the weight of not being there with them. In 1944, Warner Brothers sent him on a USO tour to the South Pacific. 3 weeks visiting bases, hospitals, forward positions. Meeting the men who were watching his movies in makeshift theaters between battles. At a field hospital in New Guinea, Wayne met a young Marine named Thomas Garrett. 22 years old. From a small town in Nebraska. He'd been wounded in the fighting on Saipan, shrapnel wounds across his chest and shoulder. Bad enough to send him stateside eventually, but not bad enough to kill him. Thomas was lying in a cot when Wayne came through on the tour. The actor stopped at every bed, shaking hands, signing autographs, trying to bring a moment of home to men who were 10,000 miles from it. When he reached Thomas's cot, the young Marine looked up at him with eyes that were both starstruck and something else. Something harder. "John Wayne," Thomas said, his voice rough. "My mother's favorite actor." Wayne smiled that famous smile. "Well, tell your mother I said hello." "Where you from, son?" "McCook, Nebraska. Population 2,000. "You'd hate it." "I doubt that. Sounds like my kind of place." Thomas stared at him for a moment. Then he said something that Wayne would remember for the rest of his life. "Must be nice," Thomas said quietly, playing the hero. "Getting to go home after the yell cut." The words weren't loud. Weren't said with particular venom. Just stated. A fact. Wayne's smile faltered. He didn't know what to say. "Sorry," Thomas added, looking away. "That wasn't fair. You're doing your part. The movies help morale. The brass says so?" "No," Wayne said, sitting down on the edge of the cot despite the fact that officers and photographers were waiting for him to keep moving. "Don't apologize. You have every right to." "I don't have a right to anything," Thomas interrupted. I watch your movies. I watched them before I enlisted. You know what I thought? I thought, that's what a man looks like. That's what courage looks like. And then I got here and I realized it's different here. It's not noble. It's not clean. It's just trying not to die while your friends do." Wayne sat there, looking at this wounded 22-year-old, and felt something crack inside his chest. "What's your name?" Wayne asked. "Thomas. Thomas Garrett." "Can I write to you, Thomas? After this? After you're home?" Thomas looked surprised. "Why would you want to do that?" "Because I need to remember. I need to remember what this costs." They exchanged addresses. Wayne left the hospital that day feeling like he'd aged a decade. That night in his quarters, he wrote in his journal, a habit he'd picked up but never publicized, one sentence: "I am playing dress-up while men die." Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most important part of this story is still unfolding. Wayne did write to Thomas Garrett. For 2 years, they corresponded. Thomas went home to McCook, Nebraska. He married his sweetheart. Took over his father's hardware store. Tried to build a normal life while carrying whatever he'd seen in the Pacific. In his letters, Thomas never talked about the war directly. He talked about Nebraska. About his wife Mary. About the hardware store. About ordinary life. Wayne treasured those letters. They were a reminder of the distance between the men he played and the men who actually did the fighting. He kept them in a wooden box in his office. He never mentioned them in interviews. never used them for publicity. They were private. Sacred, almost. In 1946, Thomas wrote that Mary was pregnant. They were naming the baby Michael if it was a boy, after Mary's father. In 1947, Wayne received a letter from Mary Garrett. Thomas had died. Not from his war wounds, those had healed, at least physically. He died by his own hand in the back room of the hardware store. Left a note from Mary saying he couldn't carry it anymore. Couldn't pretend to be normal when he wasn't. Wayne flew to McCook for the funeral. Didn't tell the press. Didn't make it public. Just showed up in a dark suit and sat in the back row of a small church while a town of 2,000 mourned a man who'd come home from war but never really left it. After the service, Mary Garrett found Wayne. She was holding a baby, Michael, 18 months old. "He talked about you," Mary said. Her voice was hollow with grief. "In his letters from the war. Then in his journals after. He said meeting you made him realize something." "What?" Wayne asked, dreading the answer. "That the version of men in the movies, the strong, certain, unbreakable men, they don't exist. And trying to be that broke him." She wasn't blaming Wayne. She was just stating a fact. But it landed like a blow. "I'm sorry," Wayne said, the words completely inadequate. "He wanted Michael to know you're just a man." Mary continued. "That you play characters but you're not them. He said he wished he'd understood that sooner. That it's okay to be afraid. To be broken. To need help." She handed Wayne an envelope. "He wrote this before he died. Asked me to give it to you if I ever got the chance." Wayne took it but didn't open it there. He waited until he was alone in his hotel room that night. The letter was short. 3 paragraphs. In it, Thomas Garrett said he didn't blame Wayne for anything. Said the movies weren't the problem, his own head was. But he asked Wayne one thing: if you ever get the chance, tell a different story. Show a man who's afraid. Who's broken. Who needs help. Show that it's okay to be that man. Wayne kept that letter for the rest of his life. It sat in the same wooden box with all their correspondence. And it changed how he thought about every role he took after that. He started choosing characters with more vulnerability. More doubt. Men who made mistakes. Men who struggled. Not in obvious ways. Wayne's image wouldn't allow for that, but in subtle shifts. A moment of fear in a character's eyes. A conversation where his character admitted uncertainty. Small cracks in the armor. Most audiences didn't notice. Critics didn't write about it. But Wayne knew. And he carried Thomas Garrett's words with him into every performance. Away from the cameras, Wayne made a choice no one expected. Now, 30 years later, standing on a movie set in Monument Valley in 1976, John Wayne was looking at a scene that required him to physically grab a young actor, pull him close, and deliver a line about how real men don't run from their past. The young actor's name was Michael Garrett. Not related to Thomas and Mary Garrett of McCook, Nebraska. Different family entirely. Pure coincidence. Except Wayne didn't believe in coincidences. Not anymore. Not about this. When he'd seen the name on the call sheet 3 weeks ago, he'd felt something cold settle in his stomach. When he'd met the young actor, Ernest, 26 years old, eager to prove himself, he'd seen something of that hospital ward in New Guinea. That same desire to measure up. To be what men were supposed to be. And this scene. This particular scene where Wayne's character was supposed to embody absolute certainty, absolute strength, supposed to physically dominate a younger man while delivering dialogue about unwavering principles. It felt like a betrayal of everything Thomas Garrett had asked him to remember. So Wayne walked off the set. The director, Michael, found him an hour later in his trailer. Wayne was holding a photograph, black and white, faded, showing a young Marine in a hospital bed. "I can't tell you everything," Wayne said quietly. "But I can tell you this much. I knew a man once. A good man. He died because he thought he had to be what men in my movies were. And I promised him I'd never forget that real strength isn't about being unbreakable. It's about admitting when you are broken. Michael looked at the script. What if we change it? What if instead of grabbing him, you just talk to him? Show him respect instead of dominance? Wayne met his eyes. Can you make that work? For you? Yes. They rewrote the scene. Wayne's character sat down with the young man, spoke quietly, admitted his own failures, showed that wisdom comes from wounds, not from never being wounded. But what followed would stay with everyone who witnessed it, forever. When they finally shot the revised scene 2 days later, something happened that no one expected. Wayne delivered his lines, new lines, about imperfection and learning and carrying the weight of choices. And tears ran down his face. Real tears. Not acting. The young actor, Michael Garrett, responded with matching vulnerability. 2 men, 3 decades apart, having a conversation about what it means to be human instead of heroic. The crew watched in silence. When the director called cut, no one moved. Wayne stood, walked over to young Michael, and shook his hand. Thank you, Wayne said, for letting me get this right. Share and subscribe. Some stories deserve to be remembered. John Wayne died 3 years later. In his will, he left a wooden box of Thomas Garrett's letters to the Smithsonian with one instruction. These taught me more than any script ever did. The scene they filmed that day stayed in the movie. Critics called it Wayne's most honest performance. He never explained why. Some truths are too private to share, but they still matter.